Salutations, respected viewers. It's George from Ireland. So I was trying to do this a moment ago, but the live feed was working. The live stream was not working, rather failed. So this video is about the Supreme Court ruling the prorogation of the UK Parliament unlawful. Just yesterday morning, the United Kingdom Supreme Court announced that proroguing Parliament was illegal since the Prime Minister had given the Queen the wrong advice, and Her Majesty the Queen had acted on the Prime Minister's advice, as she always does. So that was that. It was an 11-0 victory in the Supreme Court. The President of the Supreme Court, Lady Hale, announced their ruling, wearing her much commented upon spider brooch on her lapel. That seems to be her trademark. So Remainers are exultant, and Gina Miller is one of them. She's one of those who moved this lawsuit. She's a prominent ultra-Remain campaigner. I think she's a member of the Liberal Democrats, but I don't believe she's ever contested public office. So that's that. They're cock-a-hoop, and they got what they wanted. Now, I'm a Brexiteer, and I make no bones about that. Now, I disagree with the Supreme Court. However, I accept that they might know a teensy bit more about law than I do. So, obviously, I accept their ruling, though it's not what I was hoping for. Now, they supposedly approach this as judges. And I have heard other judges, I think it was Lord Hoffman, make a similar statement. And there was some other ruling that the relievers we mostly didn't like a couple of years ago, and one of those on the bench there said the same thing, that their reasoning is juridical, it's not political, it's not because they have an axe to grind. What are their opinions on Brexit? I don't know, but I could hazard a guess. Anyway, so they said prorogation is a nullity because the Queen was misled. So as proroguing Parliament was void, the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir John Bercow, he summoned the Commons back, and indeed in the House of Lords the same thing happened. Unfortunately, Her Majesty the Queen has been left with egg on her face, and monarchists like me, we don't like to see the House of Windsor having its honour stained, because the advice was erroneous. So supposedly, they didn't actually say that the Prime Minister had lied about his reason for advising her to do this, and it was not that he needed more time to prepare a Queen's speech. Other people say, oh, blatantly it was because he wanted to prevent Parliament having a chance to stop Brexit. Now, I believe he was doing it because he wanted to prevent Parliament blocking Brexit, and I'm a Brexiteer, and I'm broadly sympathetic to Boris Johnson's agenda. But even I think he was telling porky pies on this one, and I know it's an important issue. He did it. Does it matter why he did it? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it makes a difference in the law, but apparently I'm wrong. They didn't question Boris Johnson as to his reasons. So the thing is, the Attorney General, he's the government's barrister. He's a cabinet minister. So he's a Conservative MP who is a barrister, can be a peer, like Lord Goldsmith under Tony Blair. His advice was that this was lawful and it was proper, okay, but he was wrong. So, okay, I mean, I realise the Attorney General could be wrong. He's not infallible. He's just one amongst many barristers, presumably a reasonably good one. There we are. Now, the thing is, the boundary between parliamentary and executive authority is not clearly delineated. What is within the remit of one and remit of the other? Are they not going ultra vires? But the ramifications of this are serious and far-reaching, because the executive authority could be eroded more and more, whilst the legislature could be arrogating more competences to itself. How would we feel it went the other way? Probably worried about that. Often, Parliament has passed permissive legislation empowering the executive to do this and that, saying that the Secretary of State for Education can ban this or can allow that, and so forth. For example, could be other secretaries of state or indeed ministers of state. We need clarity, and that's the trouble about the United Kingdom not having a codified constitution. Anyway, Boris Johnson was in New York City for the session of the United Nations General Assembly, and this time of year, about 3 weeks into September, it always happens, when leaders of the world jet off to NYC, and they go to the United Nations building. Now, the UN building is not US soil. The United Nations controls that, and I've been in there. The UN flag flies, okay, the US flag flies, so do many, many more, but US writ does not run there. And the United Nations indeed has its own police force on its very small buildings, right there in Manhattan. And when I heard that, I went into the tour of the UN building. You can do that. I thought, yeah, right. I tell you what, I bet they'll be American. They're not. The two police officers I met, one was Egyptian and one was Norwegian, who are working in the UN building. I mean, there'll be all sorts of different nationalities. Probably a few of them are American. And even a tiny prison to hold anyone they need to detain there. So Boris Johnson had to cut short his trip to the Big Apple. He saw his confrère and sort of ideological soulmate Donald Trump, who was giving a thumbs up, was very supportive, and Trump was trying to bat away embarrassing questions that journalists were putting to Bojo. Now, of course, Boris Johnson is a very seasoned journalist himself. That was his first job, really his only job before he became a member of Parliament. Editor of The Spectator, star columnist of the Daily Telegraph. He's got a razor-sharp wit. He tries to conceal that between this bumbling, Bertie Woosterish persona. But supposedly he was blessed with low cunning, but his cunning plan went awfully wrong. Now, he's a bit of a farceur, but I'm not sure that he can cover this up with quips. And there are storm clouds blowing. It was a very raucous session of the House of Commons today, and of course the Remainers were jubilant. That's most of the Labour Party, all of the Liberal Democrats, the SNP, even a few Conservatives. It's very confusing. There's this independent group for change, and I can't remember who else there is, because remember Labour and the Liberal Democrats, they both lost a handful of MPs a few months ago. They broke away to form their own little faction. Some of those have left, decamped to the Liberal Democrats. So the Liberal Democrats had 12 members of Parliament, now up to 16. So they're riding high. Anyway, what's going to happen? And there are more travails ahead for Boris Johnson. He's got his girlfriend, what's her name, Carrie Simmons. She went to New York with him, and she's living in Downing Street with him. The first prime ministerial girlfriend to live at the prime minister's official residence. Times have changed, but then there's this other kerfuffle relating back to his time as Mayor of London. Remember, he stood down as Mayor of London in 2016, having completed 2 terms. It's now emerged that he gave these fat contracts to this public relations firm run by an American woman called Jennifer Arcuri, and she's only about 34 now. So she's very young when she first met Boris Johnson, much younger than him. And she made of the order of £25,000 in these various contracts, and people are saying she did almost no work for them. There were other things when there were gaps in his diary. He used to go to her flat, just him and her. What were they doing there? We don't know. They could have been talking shop, or they could have been having a horizontal encounter. That's people are putting 2 and 2 together, possibly making 5. There's been a lot of sexual innuendo about that. Was he having an extramarital affair? I'm not sure. He's already had several. Bonking Boris, they often call him. So he was a man who never once committed fidelity in his many years of marriage to Marina Wheeler, and that was his second marriage, by the way. So he's had affairs with a number of prominent female journalists in London. And so people are saying that the payments were improper. There was some sort of conflict of interests. If he was in an intimate relationship with this woman, then it would be improper, because he could be suspected of giving her these contracts just as a sweetener, and not really because she's provided the best value for money. Anyway, so Boris has obviously got very serious matters besides that one. He might be able to laugh that one off. But remember, Parliament passed a law a couple of weeks ago saying that he must request the European Union to grant the UK an extension if no Brexit deal is agreed by the 19th of October. So that's only about 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks away, the 19th of October. What sort of deal would they grant? I mean, previously the EU was stonewalling. We offered you a deal. Parliament rejected 3 times. That's your problem. You got yourself into the situation. You get yourself out of it. Now, nobody wants a no deal. Even the hardline leavers would prefer a deal, a good one, but they just don't think a good one is an offer. And so the European Union said, we're not going to budge an inch initially. There has been some wavering. Some of the more moderate figures in the EU say, okay, maybe there's some wiggle room. We can make some minor concessions. But then Boris Johnson would then have to come back to Parliament and try and present that as fantastic. Now, some of the Remainers are going to reject any deal because they want to stay in the European Union. And they'll say, the best deal is staying in the European Union, all right? And plus, they think they increased the chance of that happening by rejecting any agreement. Remember, Theresa May thrice had her agreement with the European Union voted down by Parliament, and it was mostly Remainers who voted against a few of the hardline leavers, including Boris Johnson. So you may recall July 2018, cast your mind back then, Boris Johnson, he was Foreign and Commonwealth Secretary, so therefore very closely involved in Brexit negotiations. He was at Chequers one weekend, the Prime Minister's country retreat in Buckinghamshire, and they were all nodding their assent to the strategy, and then all of a sudden he decided it wasn't good enough, he and David Davis, and he resigned from the cabinet. And Theresa May said she was very surprised because the day before he'd been on board with the whole strategy. But he was creating a splash, and he presumably he calculated that gave him a better shot of getting the top job. Well, he's got it, and it's proved to be a bit of a poison chalice for him. So he can't get his early election. Labour's refused to vote for that, and so the Lib Dems and the SNP. So they prefer to keep a Conservative government in office longer. What? You were offered the opportunity to serve. You think you're a better party, you could win the election. Okay, the polls show the Conservative Party is still ahead, actually. Boris Johnson's on his honeymoon. Labour's beset by internal travails. Fortunately for the Conservatives, there's now this very public row between Tom Watson, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, and Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party. There's talk of abolishing the position of deputy leader. There's the whole anti-Semitism dispute within the Labour Party. So it's not looking good for them. A lot of noise is off when Labour should be exposing the divisions of the Conservative Party, humiliating this paralysis on the Tory benches. Anyway, so he's got to ask for an extension, which the EU would like because it's more money for them. And they realise the longer they can delay Brexit, the more they can diminish the chances of Brexit ever coming to pass. Because every day the demographics are moving in the Remainers' direction, just a little bit. The very elderly, these octogenarians dying off, overwhelmingly Leave voters. These teenagers turning 18, mostly Remain voters, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, there's some people who voted Leave and have changed their minds. Very few people voted Remain and have changed their minds. So there's some people who were Leavers but now regret it, think it was a mistake, think they were sold a pup, it's just not practical, it's impossible. They thought they would get a good agreement with the European Union and it's not forthcoming, all the rest of it. And these Leaver politicians like Boris Johnson, they just weren't capable of carrying out the policy that they advocated. So it's fascinating the way that Parliament mandated Boris Johnson to do this. And by the way, Parliament also said the United Kingdom is not allowed to leave without an agreement with the EU. So if he doesn't get one, the UK would stay in. Except the United Kingdom can only stay in the European Union if the EU grants permission. Remember, all 28 member states, remaining 27 member states have to give permission. If one of them refuses, that's it. The other 26 say, all right, the UK can have an extension. If one of them says no, the UK's out on its ear. But will they do it? They've done it twice before. They gave a 2-week one in March. Then they gave a 6-month one. They said don't fritter away this time. Now there'll be a lot of harumphing in Brussels and Strasbourg saying the Brits, they've squandered this golden opportunity we've given them, and some of them say we just had it up to here with them. But obviously they're in talks with their allies in the United Kingdom, all sorts of Remainers. And they probably smell victory, as do a lot of the Remainers in the United Kingdom. I've been saying for months now, it's not going to happen. The elite has made its choice, and they will stop at nothing to prevent it. Now, this is what some people are saying about the judges, enemies of the people. Now, Brexiteer though I am, I thought it was disgraceful in the Daily Mail, dubbed the judiciary enemies of the people, because they have to make decisions. They're often controversial ones, sometimes deeply unpopular ones. But I believe that they should make whatever they consider to be the just and lawful decision. And that's that, without fear, without favour, not worrying about a popularity or how is this going to look, not worrying about presentational issues. And this is what justice is, and often it's a decision I find deeply frustrating or inconvenient. And there we are. So people should not try to stoke antipathy towards the judiciary, who do a crucial and a difficult and sometimes a very unpopular job. It is scintillating the way Parliament is now demanding the Prime Minister do things and passing acts of Parliament, which presumably is legally binding on him. So the executive authority is being reduced and the scope of the legislature is being increased. Is that allowed? Well, because the different competences of the different branches of the government are not so strictly defined. Remember what Walter Bagehot said in his book, The English Constitution, his 19th century work of authority. It's not called the British Constitution, which it ought to be. People often use English as a synecdoche for British back then. But anyway, he said Parliament is omnipotent in all things except the power to destroy its own omnipotence. So therefore, Parliament can actually diminish the power of the executive and take some of that to itself, if you go by what Bagehot said. And so some Eurosceptics long ago said, well, the UK can't really be in the EU, or has the right to leave any time if you go by Bagehot. And now some Europhiles said, well, okay, we agree with Bagehot, so the Parliament has chosen to be part of the European Economic Community, or the EU, to give some of its competences to them. Parliament could at any time revoke that and take them back, but Parliament never chose to do so. Although it did pass the EU Withdrawal Act. And Parliament can change its mind on the EU Withdrawal Act, could repeal that before it's ever put into effect. So anyway, but Bojo would be in the invidious position of presumably having to try and accept an agreement which is much the same as the one he voted against earlier this year. Now, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, said, well, why don't you go for a 2-year extension, a really long one, really enough time to sort it out. There was this suggestion way back in 2016. Could the UK go out in a transitional way, just phase its way out bit by bit? And I didn't want that, because then I thought it never happen. Or there might be a Brexit which is so mild, it's not really a Brexit at all. So Brexit is running out of steam. And yes, there are some hardline people who will not abandon the cause, but others who have lost faith in it. There's some fair weather Brexiteers. People have got bored rigid of the issue. You're seen as a bored obsessive if you still want it. So some people are abandoning the cause. People are going soft on it, and just saying, well, we tried, but it's just impossible. We're going to have to stay in the EU. So Remainers can't suppress a growing sense of optimism, and they're feeling buoyant because, as I say, the opinion polls have moved that way. They've got about 9 out of 10 Labour MPs, every Lib Dem MP, every SNP member of Parliament, a small number of Conservatives, and these stragglers and strays like the Green Party, 1 MP, Change UK, whatever it's called. So now they're almost invincible. So Brexit once appeared to be inescapable, but its fox has been well and truly shot. Anyway, there's talk of trying to oust Boris Johnson. Remember, he's withdrawn the whip from 21 Conservative MPs who voted against him. So he started out with a majority of 1. He's now minus 21. So who would the interim Prime Minister be? Well, there's no such position. It's a novelty. It's unknown to the British Constitution. You're the Prime Minister or you're not. Okay? Being Prime Minister is a bit like being a virgin. I mean, there's no halfway. Anyway, so could it be Ken Clarke? He's 80 years old. Remember, 25 years ago, in his diaries, Alan Clarke described Ken Clarke, no relation, described Kenneth Clarke as a pudgy life insurance liability. One of these two Clarks is still alive, and it's not Alan. Father of the House is the longest-serving MP who was elected in 1970, Ken Clarke. Margaret Beckett, sometime Foreign Secretary, acting leader of the Labour Party after John Smith died. Could it be her? A woman who's, rather unimpressive despite the offices she's held. She's certainly not well turned out. She's just a mediocre public speaker, just all round bland. But there we are, a bit of an apparatchik. So unobjectionable, I suppose. That very different from this colourful and bouncy character who is Bojo, who's like, a Jack in the Box or something out of a children's television show. A bit of a Mr. Blobby on speed. Anyway, so Corbyn has been ineffectual as Labour leader, but he has prevented Brexit, certainly so far. So that's going to give him some credit amongst the wider Remainer movement. Remember, till several years ago, he was against the European Union, almost uniquely amongst Labour MPs. He wanted to leave. When he became leader of the Labour Party, he changed his tune. And remember, he went at the last election pledging to give effect to the Brexit referendum result, as did the Liberal Democrats. The Lib Dems at least said they would have a second confirmatory vote on the deal. So I think Corbyn will be gone in January next year. He's 70 already. There was some muttering about his health. There's just been like endless rowing in the Labour Party. He lost the last election and blah, blah, blah. And he just doesn't appeal to Middle Britain. Yeah, at the far left, he galvanises them, appeal to some young people, not much more so than a decent Labour leader. So I think he'll be gone, and then there'll be a new Labour leader who's more credible, and then Boris Johnson may be in trouble. Remember, it's a do or die mission. So Bojo, if you don't achieve Brexit by 31st of October, it's die, according to you. Anyway, he may have to eat his words. There'll be a large helping of humble pie for him to gobble if he has to bring home, as I say, a deal from the European Union, very similar to the one he rejected several months ago, and say, "Ooh, what a great agreement," and try and get Parliament to vote for that, which I don't think it will, which is yet another reason why the UK is staying there. So the idea is a vote of no confidence, get Boris Johnson out, and then some government is formed with Margaret Beckett, the Labour Party, and Confidence and Supply, or a coalition with the Lib Dems and the SNP, maybe some MPs from Northern Ireland, the Social Democratic Labour Party, maybe it would change UK, that group in Parliament, perhaps a handful of these Conservatives who've had the whip withdrawn. So there we are. We live in fascinating times. It's anybody's guess what's going to happen. Boris Johnson's obviously got off to a very bad start. If he overcomes this, it could strengthen him. He's still ahead in the polls, but bear in mind he's only been Prime Minister for like about 2 months, so he's not going to last long as Prime Minister. There'll be an election coming up. That's not for like 2.5 years. Will he be leading the Conservative Party into that election? I think maybe. It wouldn't surprise me if he's gone within a year of me making this video, though. All right, that's all for now. I really rely on Patreon donations to sustain this channel. Please donate to me or via PayPal. You can find me on PayPal via my email address, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. So I'll spell George Callahan for you in the NATO alphabet. Golfer Echo, Oscar Romeo Golf Echo, Charlie Alpha Lima Alpha Golf Hotel Alpha November 79@gmail.com. So please give liberally, but not politically liberally, understand. Anything else? Yeah, I do lessons online. Contact me. English, history, politics, elocution, French, religious studies, loads of things, law. I'm a tour guide in London. Arrange a guided tour with me. Goodbye.